Procedure. During the scanning, participants viewed 96 scenes that were presented by an overhead projector and mirror that allowed them to see what was going on in the fMRI scanner. These 96 scenes were chosen from the International Affective Picture System Stimuli set. These had a normative valence of emotional value ranging from 1.17, highly negative, to 5.44, neutral. The normative arousal rating was between 1.97, tranquil, to 7.63, highly arousing. The order of these 96 scenes was randomized across all participants, so as to limit exposure to demand characteristics. For a time period of 2 to 3 seconds, precisely 2.88 seconds. For a time interval of 12 to 13 seconds on a fixation cross. This may have caused fatigue effects. They were asked to rate their reaction on the 4-point Likert scale. The individuals operating the scanner were fully trained and competent staff, following safety protocol as should be in a medical scan. Participants were asked to view each picture for the entirety of the time that it was displayed. The participants lied in a 1.5 Tesla fMRI scanner, which was used to measure the blood oxygen level dependent contrast present. Contrast imaging is used to observe the different, varying functionalities and results from the active parts. For the functional image, 11 frames were captured per trial, per participant. Each frame was assigned either as an activation image or baseline image. After 3 weeks, which was the testing period, after the first stage, participants were tested in an unexpected recognition test. This test now included 48 new foil scenes to the previous 96 scenes. These foils were selected to match the previously presented scenes in their valence and arousal characteristics. During the recognition test, participants were asked if they had not seen the slide before, of previously seen images. If the answer was yes, they were asked whether they remember the scene with certainty, remember, or were certain but less familiar, familiar. If the answer was no, it was deemed forgotten. Results. Participants' ratings of emotional intensity reflected the valence and arousal ratings of the scenes. There was found to be an appropriate and significant correlation with higher ratings of experienced emotional intensity. This provides evidence that amygdala activation is related to the subjective sense of emotional intensity, and the participant's perceived arousal is associated with the activation of the brain's amygdala. For measuring the arousal, a similar 4-point scale was used, with a 0 to 3 rating scale to the scenes. 29% of the participants rated 0 on the scale. 22% of the participants rated 1 on the scale. 24% of the participants rated 2 on the scale. 25% of the participants rated 3 on the scale. It was also found that memory recall was proportionally better for those scenes rated as emotionally intense, rated 3 rather than lower, 0 to 2. The scenes rated as 0 to 2 had similar distribution percentages of forgotten, familiar, or remembered. It is also important to mention how the activation of the left amygdala predicted how an individual scene would either be remembered, familiar, and forgotten. If there was little activation to a scene that was rated as emotionally intense, was linked with forgetting that scene. If there was intermediate activation to a scene that was rated as emotionally intense, it was linked with being familiar with it. If there was high activation to a scene that was rated as emotionally intense, it was linked to the scene being remembered. When a more detailed analysis of the left amygdala was carried out, there was found to be a significant correlation between its activation and the emotional intensity of the memory. The correlation thus became stronger the more emotional intensity was experienced, for those participants who rated 3 on the Likert scale. Conclusions. According to the findings of the study, Canley et al. Found that an association between individual, subjective incidence of perceived emotional intensity for stimuli with amygdala activation and thus the subsequent memory for these stimuli. This suggests that the more emotionally intense an image would be, it is naturally more likely to be remembered. This might help to explain why people tend to remember emotionally intense experiences well enough. The level of arousal a person is under could also impact and affect the strength of a memory trace. It was also observed and analyzed that, when participants were granted exposure to an event like this, causing the arousal, such as witnessing a crime, the trace of memory would be more powerful. It was also found that the amygdala is sensitive to individuals' witnessed and experienced emotional intensity of visual stimuli, with activity in the left amygdala during encoding being predictive of subsequent memory. Canley et al. Also comments that some of their findings are correlational, which shows a significant correlation between the emotional impact on the individual participating and the subsequent memory for the item.